Hey, what is going on? Before the start of the episode, it's time for the gentleman's weekly pick, and this time we have the Rolex SpeedKing 6020. One thing that stands out to me about this watch is the yellow gold and the smooth bezel. I love smooth bezel, and with a watch this small, 31 millimeters, a smooth bezel just makes everything cleaner. I'd say it looks better on your wrist. This watch is priced at around $3,500, but if you buy it now in the next 15 minutes, you will get $175 off. So go check it out, guys. Super nice. Let's roll the clip. Hey, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of the Gentleman Pursuits podcast. My name is Ryan. And how is everyone doing today? I've been doing good recently. Last week I went out to a really fancy restaurant. It's like a once in a month treat for myself now. I would go out on a date with myself, treat myself right? And that when I first arrived at the restaurant, the waitress told me that the restaurant was just awarded best restaurant in Vancouver. So I was like, damn, okay, let's see how good it is. And I sat down, had my meal, had a really lovely glass of whiskey with a steak. It was really expensive to dinner, but it's also different. It feels different when you're spending your own money on a nice meal instead of your parents' money. Like before, my parents, once in a while, Christmas maybe, or my birthday, my parents would take me out to a fancy dinner. They taste good, right? But it was never like, oh my God, this is really good. But now, even though it's just like a normal fancy normal fancy, but it's just, when you buy the meal yourself, when you're spending your own money, it just feels different. It feels so much better and it tastes so much better. But yeah, that's my week. That's like highlight. Hope you guys are doing well, staying healthy, staying hydrated. COVID cases in BC has gone up a little bit, but it's also dying down. So hope you're wearing a mask, staying hydrated once again. And today I want to talk about this little topic, which is how hard is it to actually be a good vintage watch collector? And by good vintage watch collector, I'm not talking about the watches you go after, because everyone has their own tastes and preferences. But vintage watch collector is exceptionally harder to be good at their job, because they have to equip themselves with knowledge to determine between fakes and authentic pieces. But there's also a huge difference between authentic and original watch. So here's a little nutshell for you guys. So authentic simply means that it is not a replica and it is a genuine piece from the brand. Original, on the other hand, is a bit more complicated, because not only does it refers to watches that are authentic, parts in an original watch cannot be replaced, and we are looking for all factory parts. So that is really rare, right? Original pieces are getting harder and harder to find, simply because the fact that there are close to none left on planet Earth. One really good point raised in an article from Bob's Watches, I'm going to link the article in bio so you guys can check it out, is that let's say in the 60s or 70s, people buy watches, and it is such a common practice for them, actually even till now, it's such a common practice for people to go service the watch, have them polished, and even change up some parts if they were damaged. So it is really hard for us now. Let's say we're searching for a Rolex that was made in the 1969, right? It's really hard to find that watch with all original parts, because close to no one will never service their watch and never get some parts replaced, right? So their price, original watches, their price has gone up astronomically. And it's one thing about spotting an original and authentic watch. While you're doing that, you have to swim through a sea of fakes and counterfeits and Franken watches. Well, Counterfeits are pretty straightforward, like straight up a watch that is fake. Like the idea is straightforward, but they themselves are not straightforward. It is also weird sometimes. Like I'm talking about those so-called Rolex watches that were priced at like 250 and people would still buy them because they like the idea of owning a Rolex instead of actually having a real one. But that's just a special case, and once again, counterfeits are pretty straightforward. The idea of counterfeit is pretty straightforward, but for you to actually spot one is really hard. And yeah, in most cases, it's really hard to spot the difference between real and fakes nowadays, especially. Before, when technologies are not that advanced, it's really hard for anyone to copy whatever watchmakers are making, right? Because they don't have the machines for that. But if I recall correctly, I saw an article somewhere that they said some counterfeiters or frauds literally had their hands on an old machine Rolex used to use in the old days. So they literally had what was in the factory before, so it's easier for them to make highly deceivable fakes now. So, and it's really, really hard. It's getting really hard for even ADs and even seasoned veterans to spot the difference between some of these fakes because they're really well made. And then there is Franken watches. So there are fakes, which are just fakes, but Franken watches are watches that, just like the Monster and Frankenstein, were made up of different parts. And Franken watches haunts my dream because I remember searching for this one vintage Seiko, and it was a nightmare trying to scrutinize onto the dial details and hope that I don't miss an obvious hint that it is a Franken watches, right? So let's say it's a watch look completely normal, right? But maybe the hands or the markers look slightly different, right? They look not as old or not as new as the watch, and maybe the badge, like Seiko 5, maybe the number 5 is slightly weird, and that is like an obvious hint that this watch may be a Franken watch, which means that this watch contains of a lot of different parts from different watches. And sometimes, let's say on Chrono24, eBay, wherever, one thing that sellers do is that sometimes they don't provide detailed enough photos. Like, are they trying to trick you or not? Like, I don't know if they're trying to trick you, but if they're trying to trick you, sometimes they would just provide really wide angle shots, like not enough detailed were shown on photos. And even if their intention is good, right? The watch, even if their intention is good, if the seller is not providing detailed enough photographs, this makes me super paranoid to even like think of buying it, because just red flags. I don't want to spend like $450, $500 on a Seiko that in the end I found out, oh my god, like they didn't show the bracelet close enough for me to actually determine if it's a fake or not, or a Franken watch. So it's just a really hard thing to be good at, I'd say. But one really interesting that I've never thought about, and that just recently occurred to me, is that from the last interview with Chris, we talked about Brigade Type 20s. He's a huge vintage Type 20 collectors and pocket watch collectors. He proposed a really good point. He said that, or he asked the question, what is an authentic military watch? And at that point in my mind, I was like, an authentic military watch would simply be a watch issued by the government to the army, and the soldiers wore them to battle and, you know, went through the thick and thin together with the soldier, right? And that is authentic to me. But then Chris proceeded to ask, then is it authentic that the watch consists of different parts or with the original parts? Since wearing the watch to battle, they're subject to damages during fights, so they would have to be serviced quite often, maybe 6 months, I don't know, 9, 10, I don't know, but they will have to be serviced quite often, and even have their parts change, because they we're not looking for, let's say some collectors, even for myself, sometimes when they see a watch that is slightly damaged, they don't really think that it's a flaw. They think that, oh, this watch has gone through a lot. So these bumps and scratches are markers that indicates that this watch has gone through a lot, right? But back in the days during wars, they don't care, right? If they see some parts were not functioning correctly, they would have to get them changed, because literally the pilot's or the soldier's life can be on the line if the watch is not working. So they will have to get it changed. So in that case, an authentic military watch would never be original. Chris said that an authentic military watch would never be original, and that got me thinking. He was right, because an authentic military watch, as I said, should contain many different parts from different time period, maybe 9 months apart, 2 years apart. I don't know, at least not all of them are from the same, or from when it was first produced, right? So I was asking myself the question, if on the market there is an actually original military watch that has never been serviced or had its parts changed because it was not damaged at all, would military watch collectors want a watch that has gone through battle, that has different parts, or one that is super well preserved? And I feel like of course it ultimately comes down to that person's preference. Maybe someone thinks that, oh my god, this is crazily rare, right? How on earth is this going to, like, how did that happen? No way, there's a watch that has never been serviced, so they value that. Or some people may think that it's not really a military watch if it has never gone through like so-called tough times, right? No bumps, no scratches. This ain't authentic. I want something that I can tell that it like a bullet shot through it or something like that. Maybe that's what's on their mind too. So it really, I can't really tell. But that's a really interesting point he raised, and I think if you've never thought of that, I would love to know how you feel about that. Make sure to comment down below and let me know. And see how many different questions you have to ask yourself when it comes to a vintage watch. Because let's say you go to an AD now, you're looking to buy a Yachtmaster from Rolex, a new one, right? You don't really have to ask yourself that much questions. You have to ask yourself the price point, right? I don't know, you have to pay premiums, whatever, wait list. These are the questions you have to ask yourself, or problems that you have to be worried about. But for vintage watches, because there's no like rule set to it, and there's no an absolute yes or no, it is really ambiguous, and it's really up to and depends on your knowledge on that particular watch and your knowledge on that certain area. Even in different categories, like I said, military watches, there are different background stories or a different set of rules for you to abide to, I'd say, and consider in order to assess its true value. And this is just too much for me right now, I'd say, to actually get into. Not that I'm not trying, but vintage watch knowledge is deeper than the ocean, I'd say. And maybe one day I will get better at it. Maybe one day I'll be able to master it. But right now I'm still really clueless, if I'm being completely honest. But I'm genuinely interested in what you think. Let me know what you think about vintage watches in a comment. And once again, this is Ryan from Genuine Pursuits. Hope to see you in the next episode. Make sure to drop a follow on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to the YouTube channel for weekly episodes of the Genuine Pursuits podcast. Thank you guys, and once again, hope to see you in the next episode. Goodbye.